listening to the Hour of History podcast with your hosts Stephen Bauman and Matthias Fueling and producer James Albel. The Hour of History podcast aims to understand how we know what we know and why the past matters. Without further delay, your Hour of History begins right now.
Hello and welcome to Hour of History. I'm your host Stephen Bauman, and I'm reconvening here today with special guest co-conspirator Ali Straub, who's talked about the Camino herself. It's good to have you. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me here.
Hour of History Studios, doing what we can. And today we're talking about the Camino Inglés, but the Camino, we're going to talk about hiking, running, whatever, because you're an active person.
And you're an active person.
And
and perhaps our listeners are active people.
And
our listeners.
I would hope so. She's making her way onto the show as a regular guest. That's fine. Cool.
So you're back, and let me just describe to everybody Steve's beard, which makes me think Camino. So I guess there was no shaving on the Camino and no shaving after the Camino.
Yeah, no. I was this close. I came home and I looked at myself in the mirror and I said I have to take it off, but then so much work was put into growing this.
You can't just
I literally worked night and day.
So you're back. Welcome back.
Thank you.
You've had a couple of weeks to decompress and kind of think about it.
This is actually something I wanted to talk about too. First off, I want to say thanks to all the people I met on the way. I met a lot of incredible people from Spain, from Belgium, from Germany, from Galicia, so thank you if you're listening, and hopefully you listen along to my reflection. And second of all, I want to talk about this like post-Camino depression.
Right. Yes, we've all been there. Let's go back though first, and back to the beginning, because I'm kind of interested. Why, when you're looking and you're interested in the Camino and you've seen The Way starring Martin Sheen, what made you decide on the Camino Inglés specifically?
Well, so I had a very limited time, this is one thing that I reflected on my many kilometers. I reflected we have such limited time,
right? And
that's one of the things you meet the people along the way, and you think, well, we can skip everything. I'm already going to be friends with this person because they had a week off and they decided to walk, or they had a month off and they thought, rather than go to Barcelona or Ibiza or whatever and club, they decided to go walk. So there's cool people. So you need time.
Right.
And I had a week off for spring break. And, with the weekends, I could extend it to 10 days. And since I had that time, I couldn't do the full Camino Frances.
Right.
And the Camino Primitivo is a little longer, so I wasn't going to be able to do that. So I said, okay, what can I do? I thought about going to Santiago and then walking to Finisterre and just doing that, but I wanted my certificate.
Right, you need that certificate. And I like the idea of kind of, when approaching it, thinking of an achievable goal, not just going and starting in kind of one spot and just walking in a particular direction, but having this kind of encapsulated goal that you can accomplish.
Absolutely.
So how many miles is the Camino Inglés?
Well, it's
kilometers, excuse me.
Yeah, you have to think of it's 117 kilometers.
Okay.
So they have that 100 minimum, and you can start in Ferrol, which is 117.
Which is where you started.
Or you could start in A Coruña, which is 70 something, and you don't get a certificate. Okay. As silly as that is. But those are both the Camino Inglés. Pilgrims used to get off at either of those docks and start their way, usually as a whole English village, which was quite intimidating, but I was alone. So I went to A Coruña first. I caught a soccer game. I watched
excellent.
Deportivo La Coruña. Ate some pulpo, the octopus.
The famous octopus.
Yes.
The Galician octopus.
So delicious. And then I took a bus to Ferrol.
Okay.
And I met some very nice Galicians on the bus who just took me under their wings. They awesome. Bought me coffee in the morning, and they said, go this way. They said, made sure I started in the right place.
Right.
Because these are modern towns in big cities. So I went to the tourist office and I got my first stamp and I was ready to go.
And you're ready to go. So it was one day in A Coruña and then Ferrol, and then And then off.
And then I was so excited. Like, I'm the worst. You'll appreciate this as a runner. I'm the worst in personal self-control. So I just got so excited and just started walking and like was ready. And I was like, I'm going to walk the whole Camino on this one day.
In one day.
And the weather was good enough.
Okay.
And so the Camino Inglés is like infrequently traveled. And the woman in the tourist office said, there's 2 Germans ahead of you and they're the only people I've seen for the last, day and a half.
Wow. So a little bit different than what we were kind of talking about last time.
Exactly.
The amount of traffic on the Camino Francés.
Right. It was like you took the highway, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
you took a little back road.
No, it is. Yes. So, I mean, if you're considering walking it and like you're after the like sort of camaraderie experience that Ali described last episode, then the Camino Francés is the place to go. But if you want to just avoid all people, Camino...
Solitude.
But I caught the Germans.
You caught the Germans, okay. So
And
how long did it take you to catch the Germans?
Only a couple hours.
Only a couple hours, okay.
Well, I walk with pace.
Yeah, no.
As you might imagine.
With purpose.
With purpose. As if I have somewhere to go. No matter how far it is. But anyway, so I caught them, and it was a Sunday, and nothing was open. Absolutely nothing. Spain totally shuts down on Sundays, especially these small little villages.
Right.
And so we were all starving. We found a tiny place, and it's the off season too, and
Right.
it's the road less traveled.
Yes.
So
You didn't have like a can of sardines, an emergency can of sardines?
no, I had nothing at all.
What?
Not even water.
Not even water.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was hard because there were no supermarkets open because I was traveling
Yeah.
Sunday morning, and the
Right.
Germans felt the same way.
Yeah.
So I could come in. They didn't speak any Spanish at all, so it was a good chance for me to sort of become the leader, and I got to practice my Spanish.
Excellent.
Whereas when I was with Spaniards, they would just say, "Sit back and let me take care of you." So it was nice. We found a little place, got some beer, and kept walking.
Oh, kept walking. Okay, so that was the first day.
Yeah.
And where did you stay with them? Where'd you sleep
No.
that
So
night?
you know how it is, like you separate and you go
Yeah.
your own pace. That's one of the neatest things is that you don't have to be together.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's kind of like, you go your own pace. You might start out, talk a little bit, and then just say, all right, I'll see you later.
Right.
I'm going to stop here. But I was feeling great. So I kept going. I ended up in a small town with nothing open. Even the albergue was closed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they had a phone number, but it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I found a bar that had opened to show the Barcelona match on Sunday night, and they had a place upstairs.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? And you stayed there?
That's what you say. You know, the Camino provides, huh?
Wow, the Camino provides. Look at that. It sounds
Yeah.
very Game of Thronesy. You went and then you stayed at the inn.
And plus, I had the beard and the furry coat, so I did look. I felt like Jon Snow. I don't know if I quite pulled it off. People were definitely staring at me.
Really? Yeah.
As I
you got that.
walked into the villages.
And did Barcelona win?
I don't remember. I was so exhausted, the first
Yeah.
night it was like 30 or 40 kilometers, and I was
Wow.
saying to myself, what did I do? Like, this is no way to spend spring break. But then I pressed on, and I woke up early the next morning, and I walked even farther. So I started doing 2 stages. So they break it up into like 4 days or 5 days. I ended up doing it in 3 days with 3 days, and then I just took a day off at the end.
Oh, wow.
So I would do, so I lumped 2 stages in and ended up doing 20 to 30 miles a day.
Wow. That's awesome.
Just because you had forewarned me, it rains all the time.
Oh, so what? Okay.
And
Did it rain?
No. No, it didn't. So I was feeling good.
Yeah.
It rained a little bit,
Mhm.
but I was like, okay, I got to take this as long as I can.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed sunny weather. I did get delirious, but I got that natural runner's
Yeah,
high.
mhm.
And so I made it to Santiago. You can see here my last stamp. I'm very proud of it. So along the way, you have to collect...
This one?
Yeah. Along the way, you have to collect stamps. And is it the most impressive, Allie?
It is. I wish you could see this, listeners. It's very impressive.
Yeah, anyway, so my last stamp was McDonald's.
Oh, yes, the last stamp is the most impressive. This is awesome. This is so cool.
Yeah, so along the way, whatever place, bar, cafe you stop into, everyone in Spain has a stamp for their business, and you ask them if they can stamp your passport to prove that you've walked it. And the funniest one was the McDonald's in Santiago. So you get to the outskirts of Santiago, and by then I was, at the end of a double stage and exhausted, and the McDonald's just looked so clean and comfortable. And I walked in and I asked do you have a stamp? Like the pilgrims, I was so out of place. But she got so excited, and she went upstairs and got her manager, and the manager came down, and it was the most even more ceremonial than the pilgrim's office at the end.
The Santiago McDonald's. Did you get
I got some wings, and I got a water and an ice cream.
That's great. And you deserved it.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, this is very impressive. Yeah, the McDonald's. I feel like I need to go back just to get a McDonald's stamp that.
Well, that's I already, as I'm entering Santiago, I was thinking, when can I go back?
Yeah.
And how can I do it for 30 days?
For more days. Wow, so look at this. So we have an albergue de Bruma. Some cafes, some bars, turismo. So what this is like a
story in itself.
A story in itself, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. And with each stamp, comes each a memory and a story, and it's funny seeing even the bar. Like I see the name Bar Ozapa. I don't know why that bar is there. I don't know who they serve, and it was just a godsend after walking on and on and on. There was just a tiny village, and they had a bar. And the guy, I ordered every time I would stop at a bar, I'd order a beer, a coffee, and a water. So rehydrate, wake up, and then relax.
And then relax, yeah, all in one.
Perfect. But that place, and then he brought out deviled eggs for me, because I must have looked in a bad state.
You looked like you needed protein. Just an aside, can you imagine if you invented a drink that did all three of those things at once?
I think it's Four Loko. I'm not endorsing Four Loko. Yeah, so it was great.
Wow. I'm kind of interested thinking about this as a physical journey. So was it, mostly flat? Was there a lot of up and down? Were you in the woods? Was there...
Yeah, the way I could describe it is, it was pretty woodsy. I've heard the Camino Frances is more road. Mm-hmm. It was woodsy and it was hilly. So it was kind of like San Francisco at times.
Oh, yeah.
The sorest part were my hill muscles.
Really? Your hill muscles? Which are where?
The back, legs,
mm-hmm.
The glutes.
The glutes, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that was definitely the most sore.
Yeah.
My feet held up because I just used running shoes.
Okay.
Had it been wet, I would have been in trouble.
Yeah.
And I did get in trouble because I got really bored in Santiago. It's a beautiful town, but I don't have much money.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So you can only eat so much pulpo.
Right.
And so I wanted to go to Finisterre. Mm-hmm. So I started walking to Finisterre, and the first day the weather was horrible.
Really?
It was freezing, and it was raining, and I just got soaked. All my clothes were completely soaked. It rained the entire day.
Oh, no.
And
that was my whole Camino experience.
Exactly. And I was just totally ill-prepared to go. I ended up 40 kilometers from Finisterre, and I was I couldn't go. I had just wet clothes. Wow. I had to stay and dry out.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, there's no heat in the albergues.
Yeah.
It was cold. I was the only one there, too. It was really weird. The doors were just left open, and they...
So you just walked right in?
Yeah. It was sort of like... the other side in Stranger Things, or
Yeah, the underwater.
Except there was,
whatever it's called.
Yeah, but it was a kind of anti-Camino experience because it was so solitary.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. So what, did you make it, or did you?
I didn't make
turn
it.
back? So you
did
you go back to Santiago?
Well, so one of the themes of the Camino, and everyone says it, is just walk your own Camino.
Yeah.
And it's so true.
Yeah.
There's no right place to start or right place to finish. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the cool, appealing thing of running too. And I think you appreciate this. You ran a marathon in the meantime, didn't you?
I did a half marathon
last
weekend. Yeah. So I did it in Wilmington, Delaware. Beautiful Wilmington,
And
Delaware.
how'd you do? You ran your own race?
It was great. Yeah, and that's why I love running, because, I'm not a big time runner. I'm kind of more into distance, and I just love to run. Yeah, my own
scenic
race.
Wilmington.
Scenic Wilmington. Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's sort of the thing about the Camino is you run your own race, you walk your own Camino, and I got to this town, Olveroa, on the way to Finisterre, and I was soaking wet and freezing cold, and my clothes wouldn't dry. I hung them up all night, and then the next day it was raining too, and I said, "Oh, this is terrible." So I called a taxi. I took a taxi to C, which is like the penultimate town before Finisterre, and I went to the Atlantic Ocean, got a couple scallop shells.
Yeah.
And then I took a bus back to Santiago, and it was a beautiful bus ride along the Galician coast.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, and then I got back to Santiago and took a warm shower and got some warm clothes from Zara.
Yes. Zara, I love Zara.
Which was born in La Coruña.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. But that was one of my favorite stores in Valencia.
Yeah, no, Spanish institution.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting that you bring that up, and I think that's great because, walk your own walk, race your own race. And I think that when it comes to things like hiking and running and general interaction with nature and the outside, you have to be willing to kind of, change your plans to really, fit what's going on. I think that's okay.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to do.
I was thinking about that. I think, and you have more experience in this than I do, but comparing American hiking. So often when I was on the trail, I was thinking how would this be different if I was doing the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Coast Trail, or the Continental Divide or any of those. And those seem to me to be much more solitary, much more wild. And, does that help you do your own? Or what do you feel?
To help you, I don't know, because...
is it more solitary hiking in America?
I don't know. That's a good question, because from my, only experience hiking abroad was doing the Camino when it was this kind of big year and I was on the main route. And I would say absolutely, but it seems like from your kind of experience that maybe there are some solitary... It
is solitary, but you're still you can hear the highway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You're never that far from civilization. So I guess if you're a starting hiker, the Camino's kind of super easy.
Yeah. And I did once I did an overnight backpacking trip in the Grand Canyon, which was 5 days, and my companion and I didn't see anyone the entire time. And it was a little it was kind of like my early backpacking, and I don't think I had any business doing that, because I think if we would have had some sort of emergency or something, we would have been,
What do you do? If you get lost, and you hear about people who get lost on the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, and people who get lost all the time in Arizona and these places, and I don't know, maybe it's just maybe we can kind of just chalk it up to the sheer vastness that is America and some of the wilderness.
And there's no cell service there.
Right.
That was one of the frustrating things is I wanted this whole thing to disconnect.
Right.
And so I was purposefully trying to disconnect, but I have T-Mobile, so I have data anyway. So 90% of the time I had data, so I had to turn data off so my email wasn't syncing.
Yeah.
And then Wi-Fi was the temptation was there. So when you stop at the hotel or the bar or the albergue, they all have Wi-Fi.
Right.
And so it's you could do it, but I chose not to.
Yeah.
And I think that was meaningful.
Yeah.
I highly recommend
whenever I go and usually I'm doing these short trips on the Appalachian Trail, and I always I just pretend that I don't have to say, oh, well, I'm leaving and I won't have service, so I'm sorry. And I guess it's a little bit different too, because, when you're finished in the Appalachian Trail for a night, you're sleeping in a lean-to or you're sleeping in your tent. It's not really you're going to these small towns, and most of the time if you do want to go to a small town, you have to hitch or you have to walk, at least a mile or something.
So yeah, that was something I wanted to ask you. If you were to do the Camino again, would you bring a tent and stuff? Is that even possible? It's not really...
Yeah. It's not... I don't know. I feel like somebody would come up and tell you to move and get in the albergue.
Because there's also a ton of dogs.
Yeah.
Were there a bunch of dogs on your way?
No, Dogs that stuck out. Dogs? There were lots of dogs?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Every house, they were all behind the fence, most of them. Like 90% were behind the fence or tied up. But they let you know when
really?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Like, and I never felt in danger. Like, they were all like well-trained German shepherds, but cuidado con los perros. I don't know what I'm gonna do if a German shepherd like gets loose or gets mad at me. Right. So that was kind of like intense. And they were everywhere. And I heard like some of the other routes have even more dogs.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I guess that's like if you're doing the PCT or the Appalachian Trail, you have to worry about bears.
Yeah.
So I guess it's have to worry.
So what do you do? Do you bring things for bears?
Well, in the Appalachian Trail, I've never hiked like any part of the PCT, but apparently if you're doing that, you need to have some bear protection. But in the Appalachian Trail, generally just know what to do, and what you should do is like nothing. Ignore the bear.
And just hope he walks away.
Hope he goes away. And then if the bear does come up to you, this is just for everyone's knowledge, you say "no bear" in like a stern voice.
That's what I tried with the dogs.
Really?
Yeah.
No dog.
Thankfully, no is the same in English and Spanish, so I was okay. Yeah, interesting. That's one of the things about the Camino too, is that Spain is pretty deforested.
Yeah.
So there are some trails, and there's trees by the trails, but there's no forest.
Right.
And there's not really any wildlife. Mm-hmm. Like, the birds,
yeah.
We've talked about this. No, it's basically like a big bird walk.
That's awesome.
So every morning, I just felt like I was birding. Yeah. Because it was out in the country, like it was more like farm, pasture land. And so along these trails, birds just singing, and especially since it was not too rainy. Mm-hmm. Oh, it was awesome.
And you're in this springtime.
Springtime. Now I should have brought my birdnoculars, and then...
I'm surprised that you didn't.
Well, I was trying to minimize weight.
Right.
And that didn't go so well. I packed too much.
Yeah.
Like, even you think, this is ridiculous. I've got to pack at least 2 shirts. Mm-hmm. Or 3 shirts or whatever. But even 2 seems like too much.
Right. So did you have like a sleeping bag for
I did.
the albergues? Okay.
Yeah. So I had it was super light, like sleeping case, really.
Yeah.
It didn't keep me very warm.
No.
So I ended up sleeping in layers anyway. Mm-hmm. So then it's like I wasn't even putting the clothes back in my backpack.
Right.
Because I didn't have many pairs.
Mm-hmm.
The best was the sports, the moisture wicking, the under layer. Mm-hmm. And that was just because it would take all the water off and it would dry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then the cotton is just useless.
Yeah. That's like the number 1 rule. No cotton.
No, I didn't follow rules. I took this JanSport.
Oh, wow. You fit everything in that JanSport?
Yeah, I didn't. I brought hardly anything.
Wow, that's impressive. Especially because you were kind of, in other places besides just on the trail.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was tough. It was tough, but I did learn that you have to have food with you. Mm-hmm. You have to have water. A can of Coke is usually good. Mm-hmm. And then you just pray that they wake up by 11 in the morning to serve you coffee. And then it's a tiny little coffee and a croissant. And it's like, I've been walking for 6 hours. This croissant is going to do nothing for me.
Yeah.
So I definitely became a food hoarder.
Mm-hmm.
Got some really big chocolate bars.
I always backpack with a Toblerone. Maybe 2 Toblerones. I love Toblerones.
So that's the way to do it.
That's the way to do it,
Yes,
yeah.
That would have been helpful pre-walk.
Oh, yeah.
Allie.
I should have brought you a Toblerone. There's nothing like that, just the end of the day, long day, if I can just eat a Toblerone yourself.
You burn so many calories.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because they're just a constant motion. I had a net gain of 1 pound.
Oh, really?
I did a total of walking 100 miles. So like 180 something kilometers, mm-hmm. or I forget the exact, but it was a total of 100 miles and a gain of 1 pound. Because all the food too, they love the ham so much, the sliced ham
the ham serrano.
And chorizo, mm-hmm. and
yeah. Well, that's the thing too. I feel like you're, spending your entire day walking. You feel like you just want to do nothing but eat.
It's true. Eat and drink. And one of the albergues had a soda machine with beer. So it was €1 coin, and then you press it and you get a Estrella Galicia.
They need to put those on the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, that was dangerous. And then we would be there, and the guy was like, yeah, you can order dinner for the albergue, and dinner will be served at like 8:00, and everyone looked at each other like, we're exhausted, man. It's like 6:00. We've been hiking all day, and he's like, they're already opening early for you.
Yeah. You know Hiker's Midnight. Do you know what time Hiker's Midnight is?
No, I don't know.
8 p.m. is Hiker's Midnight.
And it totally makes sense.
And it makes sense, especially too. You're getting up early. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was brutal. That was unfair. The Spanish schedule is not conducive to hiking.
To hiking, right?
Or to general American patterns of coffee consumption.
Right, yeah.
Or quantities. Man,
yeah,
we just...
small.
Even when I go out, and I go on very, like, modest, plastic hikes, but I always start with coffee.
Yeah. You gotta get,
get going.
You gotta get, I have a little mini coffee maker that I can bring around with me.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like it goes on my little stove and just make yourself a cup of coffee.
So you're now a fully experienced, fully geared runner, outdoorser, hiker. I think you kind of have to do the Camino again. I
think I do. I would love to do it again.
I was thinking, if I do it again, I'm going to get a better rain gear. Like something to actually cover my backpack.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think what else would you like?
Oh my goodness, if I did it again, it would be such a completely different experience. I would have my morning coffee. I would have all my bars. And
would you go alone?
I would go alone.
I would go,
I would go alone, yeah. I think my experience was, at the time, I was like a little bit younger, and I think it was good having those people that I knew. But I think now, at this point in my life, I would love to definitely go alone.
Yeah, it's important. You definitely do meet the alone travelers.
Yeah.
And even the groups are alone.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of strange. Like, you couldn't even tell they're groups at the albergues, really.
Yeah. So how many people a night would be at the albergues?
Not many, like 1, 2, 4.
Wow. Yeah.
Like nothing.
So that's a really different experience. That we had our own hikes.
No, that's what it is, and there were people that had hiked the Camino Portuguese on that I met in Santiago, and they said it rained the entire time.
Wow.
The coastal Portugal the whole week rained, and these were German. Most were Germans because they had the same spring break, and it's super cheap for them to get there. But there were a couple like Portuguese and Spaniards who have hiked it a million times. So there were definitely the veterans and the experience. I think they go in March when there's not a lot of people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they're kind of avoiding the crowds.
And definitely my whole beard look scared people, but I think it gave me a lot of pilgrim credit.
Yeah, no, like you had been growing it the whole time. Like that grew just in those 4 days that you were on the Camino.
Yeah. No, it was great. So
So how is your post-Camino depression?
It's the worst.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It's like post-vacation depression, but it's worse because you're not getting pumped with those endorphins from walking for just 4 days.
And it's not quite like a post-race in running where you could just run the next day.
Right.
Like, I suppose I could run and like that would be a substitute, and I do, but it's not the same as that slow... the slow pace. It's terrible. In fact, from the Barnes Conference, Temple's Fine Graduate History Conference was last weekend, and I walked home from Center City. Just like any chance, which is about like 3 or 4 miles, nothing big, but any chance I get to walk multiple miles now, I'm like, I could walk.
When we had the snow last week.
Oh, yeah.
And I was trapped in my house, and my girlfriend lives in West Philly, and it's 4.2 miles away. And I was like, I could walk. So I put all my gear on, and I actually took my trekking poles because it was so snowy, and I trekked. And I was like, this is awesome. And it was great. And it was like I got to see the city. It was quiet.
And you didn't need, and the snow didn't stay or anything.
Yeah.
So it's just regular boots.
It was, I had,
snowshoes?
no, oh, I wish.
I'm interested in that, yeah.
I just had, my hiking boots.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's good.
Yeah, that's how it goes, though. Once you, and I think that's why, like, they do say the Camino changes people, and I would encourage anyone to do it. Like, it's very easy level, except, I mean, it is strenuous, like doing San Francisco-style hills, but the fact that you can go at your own pace, and you can cheat if you want to. Like, you can take taxis and no one cares.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I tried to kind of make people, like, I kind of pressed a little bit about authenticity. No one cares.
Really?
Yeah.
And I love that. It's, if you have to take a taxi one day.
It's fine, yeah.
You have to take a taxi one day.
Even in the pilgrim's office. So you bring this credential with all your stamps to the pilgrim's office and you fill out the form. I was the 9th pilgrim of the day and I got there at 6 p.m.
Wow.
From all the Caminos.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how slow, like, and there was no one in the square. It was actually a beautiful moment. You start in, like, industrial Santiago and you inch your way. Right. And on the Camino Inglés, it's the only one that you can't see the cathedral before you enter the town.
Oh.
So it's just kind of ugly.
Yeah.
And it's just a city. And, I did my McDonald's and I kept going and I got to the square. And right as I got to the square, the clouds moved and it was sunny. It was just a beautiful moment. And there's like no one in the square. It was very empty. But you're like exhausted. You're kind of delirious. I wanted to get my certificate, my Compostela. So I went to the pilgrim's office and I got it. But then you can't even go into the cathedral because you still have a backpack, and backpacks aren't allowed in the cathedral.
So did you?
So I had to go find a place to stay.
And then go in the cathedral.
It was just, and by then I was like super exhausted.
Right. And you're just kind of wishing, I wish I was just back on the trail.
Yeah.
Not dealing with this BS.
I think, so it's just, I guess it's just ultimately a huge escapism.
I guess. I don't, the thing I know that is the way that I deal with that, post depression is I always just come back and immediately will plan the next thing that I want to do, and maybe I won't plan it and book it, but it'll just be in my kind of periphery of something like, the next time I get a little bit of time I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So
well, that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
And no, it does help a little bit. And one of the things like I've done, so I brought along a notebook and I found that I wasn't writing in the notebook while I was on. I had a lot of good thoughts. I had a lot of times when I was walking and had no thoughts. I had a bunch of podcasts downloaded. I didn't listen to one of them.
Really?
I've just never felt the need. Like I was so content the whole time. But I also didn't really write because when I finished, I was exhausted.
Right, yeah.
And so that's kind of one way I've been dealing with it. It hasn't helped enormously, but I've been writing a lot and like reflecting on it.
Yeah.
And reflecting on like too the idea of this like pilgrimage. It's kind of different than like regular hiking, right? Because there's some other aspect to it. You're going to meet different people. But it's kind of funny that it is pilgrimage and it's still such a privileged activity.
Right.
Like, you pretty much have to have a lot of, like, I had no money and I was, like, struggling.
Yeah. And to think about it, too, like, to get to these places, if you're coming from anywhere that's not your front door, absolutely. It's a certain amount of privilege to be able to do this.
And to save yourself. Like, talking about hiking, too, like, if you're going out, you need technology.
Right.
To not not be in danger, really. Like, I could have got, like, so I'm aware of myself and I'm a healthy, young adult male. So, like, I'm in a good situation, right? But, like, when I was walking to Finisterre and it was raining and cold and windy, like, I had to be conscious of, like, my freezing hand,
Right.
like, and I knew if I pushed too far, I would get something like hypothermia. If I had the right gear, I wouldn't have to worry about that.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So, like, it's a safety issue, too.
Yeah. And I wonder, the question is, and I think the National Park Service has been trying to kind of do this more, is with their whole kind of Find Your Park campaign. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Can you tell us what is Find Your Park?
Yeah, so it's basically just like a campaign that tries to get people involved in, like, locally with the kind of state parks and, city parks and stuff like that. But just really trying in a way to make known that these places, places that we kind of go to escape can be generally used by people, and just kind of encouraging that. Because I think in a lot of ways, things like the Camino de Santiago, even the Appalachian Trail, the PCT are very inaccessible to people for a variety of different reasons. Cost, gear, technology, stuff like that. And just kind of trying to make an effort for people to realize that there's other places where you can go and enjoy these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really cool and really helpful. I think one of the cool things about the Camino is that you can also do it by bike or horse. Yeah. Because it's on the road so much. Mm-hmm. And that really opens the possibility for a lot of people who otherwise they might be able to, but it might not have the time or whatever. I met this 65-year-old Belgian man who had represented the unions his whole life. Just a good guy, and he was funny. And he was walking at his own pace, but he was walking the Camino Inglés first, and then he was going to plan to get a bike and do it from Belgium. Oh. And he said, that way I can see more, and And absolutely. I thought, how cool is that?
That's awesome.
That's something we don't necessarily have with our trails because they're super trails.
Right.
You're out there.
Yeah. So if you wanted to kind of get across or up the United States, you're going to be on roads.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
that you probably don't want to be on.
Yeah. So
let me tell you, so this is something that I always am thinking when I'm doing these kind of long hikes, and I wonder if you felt this same way. But you went out there and you walked 20 miles a day. Do you think, I could be running this?
Do I think that, or did I think that?
Do you ever think that? Did you think that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was wondering the ramifications of that. Can you get a Compostela if you run it? Because it's like an ultra marathon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually I Googled this before I got here, and
awesome.
the FKT, which is the fastest known time of the Camino Frances, was done by a Spanish teacher from Virginia, a woman named Jennifer Anderson, and she did it in 2011. And she started in Saint Jean Pied de Port, went to Santiago, so it's 500 miles. She did it in 9 days, 5 hours, and 29 minutes.
No, on foot?
On foot, supported, which means she supported herself. So she was self-supported. So she ran with a 5-pound backpack.
See, this is where I would be super snooty and say, I didn't know the Camino was a race.
Well, she did her own Camino. But...
So typical in American, right?
Yeah.
And of course it's an American.
Of course it was an American.
I felt bad doing it in 3 days. I enjoyed it, and it was the right pace for me, and I didn't feel like I was rushing. Mm-hmm. So that was important to me. But I think other people might have perceived me to be rushing through it.
Oh, really?
So I understand we all have our own pace. We all have our own Camino.
Right.
And so hers just happened to be ridiculous pace.
Ridiculously paced.
She ran. She had to have
She ran it, yeah. She ran it. She's an ultramarathon runner.
It's like Dean Karnaz is doing a marathon every day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He could finish the Camino in, 9 days?
9 days, yeah.
That's crazy. But would you want to do that?
I have got the ultra marathon itch.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, so I actually, very recently, about a month ago, a guy from Boston, and I only know him by his Instagram handle, which is Stringbean, set the fastest known time record for the Appalachian Trail, and he did it in 45 days. But I was very excited for him, and I followed him.
He did the Appalachian Trail in 45 days?
Yeah, which is 2,100 miles, and he did it supported. Self-supported. So
can we just stop there for a second? Just to put things into perspective, the Camino Frances, which is typically like a longer Camino, is 500 miles. Appalachian Trail 2,100 miles. That just shows you how big America is.
Yeah, it usually takes people about 4 or 5 months to go to through hike the complete Appalachian Trail. He did it in 45 days.
Right, and most people just do section, go home.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, it's possible to be doing these things while running. I think you really beat your body up.
Yeah, I don't know that. So on my Camino, my feet escaped relatively unhurt. I didn't get blisters or anything. Mm-hmm. But when I got home and stopped walking, the whole bottom layer of my foot came off. It was disgusting.
I've never had that happen to me.
It wasn't like a blister, and it was just like a natural. Okay, we're done with this.
We're done with this now.
It was pretty gross. But my joints were fine.
Yeah.
And I don't think that would be the case running. It's just such a pounding.
Yeah, especially going up and down and rocks and he was really, String Bean was really beat to hell. He was beat to hell.
Well, what's he gonna do, the Continental Divide next?
Yeah, I don't know. He went back to his job in Boston. He's just like a regular dude.
Regular person.
And I think that's kind of what's interesting to me mostly about ultramarathons is for the most part it's just regular dudes, regular people, regular women who just can go out and you know, it's kind of like hiking. You can spend your whole day hiking 8 hours. Why can't you run for 8 hours? And I think it's that kind of thought process. That's right. Kind of how I understand it.
No, yeah, it makes sense. And but I imagine on the Camino, if you were racing, or not racing, even running, people would get like angry. Like, I don't know, but I never got that sense. That's weird. I felt like people might be more like that, but they aren't. Yeah. Everyone is so nice.
Yeah. And everyone's just doing their own.
Yeah, and then you come back, and it's kind of funny. So, like, you see this, like, rural Spanish time setting where you sleep in late, and, you know, people are not moving as much in the morning. It's quiet in the morning, and people stay up much later. Mm-hmm. And then you come back to the United States where it's just like... Well, first of all, you come back to the United States, and I made the mistake of flying into Newark. So I land in a third world airport, and it was just... horrible. And I thought, like, a lot of people, you know, come to the U.S. and just see after, like, wow, this is America. And and then I went to New Jersey Transit. Oh, it was disgusting. The whole trip I had not been on such a dirty train with just the noise pollution, trash everywhere. Like, and I think that really kicked off a couple weeks of just, it's very hard. So I've been back for like a couple weeks now. And man, I would love to be out there. Yeah. And I, you know, thankfully American cities have green spaces still. Right. So, you know, it's possible to go hiking, but it does take a conscious effort. It takes a car. It takes resources. It takes time. Absolutely. And that's another thing, you know, working, especially like, I don't mind working on the podcast and things like that, but other work we have, it's just very time consuming. Work is the worst. Work sucks. Can't we just always be on vacation? Yeah. So altogether, it was an amazing experience. I highly recommend the Camino Inglés if you have 5 to 7 days. I also encourage people like Allie to run the Camino. Do it during, it's raining all the time. Yeah. Just get good gear. Get good gear. But there's many routes. There's not just the Camino Inglés and Camino Francés. Right. You could go any route you want. And I think that's very cool. I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. And I'm going to do it again because I have been inspired, and I'm not going to run it. Maybe I'll run one day. Yes, good. Well, before we go, I wanted to present you with this scallop shell. Oh. A scallop shell I brought from the end of the earth as a little token of appreciation for coming on for me? Hour of History. And inside, I gave you one of those smashed pennies with the Compostela on it. Did you do the machine? I did. I hand cranked it. You hand cranked it. I chose the scallop shell, sort of meta scallop shell inside of a scallop shell. I love it. I love it. It's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'm glad to know a fellow Camino alum. Camino alum. There we go. We're still students of the Camino. We are. We'll always be students. One never graduates, even though we have our Compostelas. So. Thank you for joining. Yeah, thanks for having me. Buen Camino. Buen Camino, everyone. This has, again, been the Hour of History. It's our world, anytime, any place. Thanks for listening.